Secretary John Phelan, we're here aboard the USS Gerald R floating around in the ocean. It was a great flight out here. Appreciate you taking the time. How's it been stepping into a role, Secretary of the Navy? Everybody I've talked to has said you picked up steam really quickly. What do you think about it?
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an incredible opportunity. I think I can use my business background and experience to help out the Navy and try to basically execute the plans that the President wants. The President wants a strong military, strong Navy. I can't think of a force that does more than the United States Navy.
Right.
And so we really need to do that. There's some changes we need to make, which are really important. And I think both Secretary Hegseth and President Trump, we've got back to the warfighter ethos, and we're seeing that already, and we're seeing dividends from that. It's been good so far. Really enjoy it. It's been, honest, a lot of work, but that's what it's about.
No, I mean, and that's the great thing about President Trump's cabinet and the people he's bringing in to run these things. You're a businessman. One of the things he just signed, executive order, new shipbuilding. They're dumping $1 trillion into the new DOD budget almost. It's going to be a monumental change from the last administration, obviously. What's your take on mission readiness and how critical it is to build some of these new ships he was talking about?
Yeah, so I just spoke about this at the Naval Air and Sea Conference. Readiness is my #1 priority, and I can tell you after visiting the Iowa, our latest Virginia-class sub, and being on this ship, we're ready. And I think that our adversaries should not in any way underestimate our capabilities. Now, I think, you're a former SEAL. As you know, you always want to improve and get better, and there are things we can do to get better, and that's really my job. I think there's a lot to unpack in your question of shipbuilding and also the budget. In terms of shipbuilding, as I've said, the President's shipbuilding. There's a lot of things we have to do. It requires, I think, a whole of government approach. We do need funding that's predictable and has a multi-year aspect to it. I think we do need to give the President the flexibility to allocate capital in an efficient manner. Because I think the real problem, honestly, being involved in this right now, is that we have underinvested in the military and in our capabilities. And the bill for that is now coming due. And we have to deal with that, and that means we have to be more efficient with how we spend. But we also need the money to maintain the capability.
The Houthis are not a very advanced force. Obviously, we have plenty of capabilities, but China's been outbuilding us ships almost 100 to 1 over the last few years. People don't understand. We're standing on a moving city right now, and it's totally functional, and people don't understand the gravity of this. And we have 11 of these aircraft carrier battle groups. What does that, what does that stack up to something like China's capabilities? Are we ready, God forbid, something needed to happen?
Yeah, I believe we are, but we need to continually invest because they are closing the gap. From what I understand, China built more ships last year than we have since World War II in 1 year. So it is a huge gap. I think the President has correctly identified this as an issue. I would actually call it a national emergency. I think that we have hollowed out our economy. We've hollowed out our ability to make things and manufacture things. We need to bring that back. And that's really the intention of the President, and it's my job to try to execute that and get that better along with Secretary Hegseth. So I think it's very critical. We do need to continue to up our game is what I would say.
But the other thing, when we go back about talking about investing and things like that, I mean, this has been World War II. We won because we out-innovated. We were producing ships at a rate far greater than anybody else in the world. When we talk about being capable on a global stage, if we have to go somewhere at any given time, is America funded enough now? Was there not enough damage done in the last administration to recoup and be able to put bullets in bad guys now, or are we still catching up?
I think we have that capability today. I just think the gap is closing. Okay. And so we just need to make that gap bigger. And so by proper investment, I think we spent a lot of money in the last administration on unnecessary things that did not make sense, which greatly affected our readiness, affected our morale and our unity as a unit. So I think that's really important.
Well, Secretary Hegseth also just announced that he's cutting $5.1 billion in waste that went into DEI programs. And from my time in the service, I didn't care if you were black, white, blue, green, whatever next to me, as long as you could pull the trigger just as fast as I could. That's what mattered. How much has that hurt our readiness, and how the reversal of that, how's that affected it?
I think the reversal and what Secretary Hegseth has done has very quickly reversed this already. But we need to stay vigilant on this. The military, to me, has always been a very meritocratic organization. As you mentioned, you don't care color, gender, as long as that person can do the job. Right. And we need to make sure we have the best people in that job. That is critical. And I believe the new policy that we've implemented by Secretary Hegseth has definitely contributed to an uptick in our readiness. Mm-hmm. Look at our recruiting numbers. They've gone up pretty substantially, and we need more people, and we need to do that for sure. And I think that's a direct result of President Trump and Secretary Hegseth's policy.
A huge stark difference in recruiting numbers. Obviously, not meeting recruiting numbers under the last administration. One of the big things, vaccine mandates. A lot of soldiers, they removed them for refusing to get the vaccine, and they said they offered it back. Only one person came back. Shocker, right? However, this administration has been much more attuned to making sure that those guys are getting in even with back pay. Has that had an effect positively?
Yeah, we're hoping to pick those numbers up. I've been looking into that. That's something that's really important. We definitely want to get to people who were unnecessarily kicked out, and we haven't yet seen the uptick in it, but I'm hopeful that will be corrected. Yeah.
Let's talk about physical standards. We know Secretary Hegseth every day. He's out there working out with his own guys. Obviously, a man of the troops. Everybody I've talked to who's met with him in the field has said, this is a guy who really understands the mission on the ground. Fitness standards, they've been waning for the last 20 years under a variety of different administrations. How important has that been, and how much of a needle has that moved in the new Navy under this president and this Secretary of Defense and yourself?
Yeah, so I think we've reintroduced the standards that are correct and that needed to be done. I feel like we're in pretty good shape. I was just actually at MARSOC, so seeing those Marines train and go through MARSOC training was pretty impressive, to be honest. And I feel like we're in pretty good shape there. Again, these things take some time to implement and get in, but we're beginning to see that more and more from the policy that we've implemented.
If you had one message to the troops, what would it be, coming in as Secretary of the Navy?
Bravo Zulu, and go kick some ass.
Yeah, well, sounds like you're ready to kill some bad guys, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.